Hello, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham, and I am the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. I want to welcome all of you to today's webinar, How to Nail Your Med School Interviews, to be presented by Accepted Consultant, I should say Senior Consultant, Highly Experienced Consultant, Cydney Foote. Before we start, I'd like to bring a few items to your attention. Cydney may ask a question during the presentation and ask you to raise your hand in response. As I'm sure you all realize, you can do so by clicking on the hand icon on your control panel. And if you're here because attending medical school is the way you can achieve or pursue the career of your dreams, please raise your hand on that control panel. Again, if you're here because you want to pursue a career in medicine, your dream career, please raise your hand or click on that hand icon. Okay, great. Well, most of you are here. Yeah. Okay, you're here for the right reasons. That's fantastic. Okay, raising hands allows you to respond to our questions. What about your questions? We have a lot of time at the end of Cydney's presentation for questions, and we'll answer them then. You can pose them at any time. I just ask that you use the question window for your questions and the chat window for your responses to our questions, okay? We're also going to ask questions, and sometimes open-ended questions, and that was the reference to the chat window. If Cydney asks an open-ended question, please post your answers in the chat window. We'll be able to go through a lot more questions if they're all in the question window, and obviously your answers are in the chat window. When you leave, you'll receive a brief survey. Please fill it out and value your feedback. Now, I also want to announce a coupon for you folks, people who registered for this webinar, and especially those who are attending it, $100 off a gold mock interview package. The coupon code is ACE-YOUR-IV, and this is available for you from August 17th to 22nd. And no, you don't have to use it during those days. You can just purchase it then. Now, at this point, I'd like to get to know a little bit about you, and so would Sid, who's here. And I'm going to ask, put a poll, launch a poll. And that is, how many of you are applying this cycle, 2021-22, next cycle, 2022-23, later? I'm not sure when I'm applying, but I haven't yet applied. Okay, again, the options are this cycle, next cycle, later at some point in time. I'm not sure when I'm applying, but I haven't yet applied this cycle. Okay. All right, we have 87% participating, so I'm going to close it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which I think is up to 90. Here are the results. So 78% of you are applying this cycle, 11% are applying next cycle, 8% are later, and 3% are not sure. Okay, great. Now the next poll, which will pertain mostly to the 78% that are applying this cycle, is, have any of you already received interview invitations? Okay. Okay, we have 81% participating. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll, and here are the results. First of all, congratulations. It shows that 33% of you have received them, and 24 have not, which makes perfect sense because there's a significant percentage that hasn't applied yet, about 20% of you. So that's fantastic, I think, at least. Congratulations. Finally, I'm thrilled to introduce Cydney Foote, who will present How to Nail Your Med School Interviews today. Prior to joining Accepted, Cydney worked as an administrator at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She's also the author of the ebook, Write Your Way to Medical School, and 2 other ebooks. Using her healthcare experience, eagle editing eye, and storytelling skills, Cydney has been helping Acceptance clients gain acceptance to demanding medical schools and residency programs since 2001. She's particularly skilled at interview prep and will share her secrets with you during this webinar. And now, Cydney Foote will present How to Nail Your Med School Interviews.
Oh, sorry, I have to unmute myself. Hi, everybody. Congratulations to everybody that's been invited to interview. That's great news. And if you haven't yet, then don't worry about it. You're still early in the season, so you are doing fine. But tonight, I want to share some information that I hope will make your interview prep just a little bit less stressful and help you present yourself as somebody who's ready for medical school. So I'm going to be covering a lot tonight, and I am going to be taking a lot of questions at the end. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get my screen set up. So can you see the how to nail your medical school interview page right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So I wanted to say I'm going to be taking a lot of questions at the end, and you're always welcome to send me questions later. I'm happy to answer your questions. Before we start, I'd like to share a short clip from an old show, ER, that shows some medical school applicants in practice. And give me just a second. I need to turn the audio on here. There we go.
I really want to help people. My dad died of lung cancer, and I was 12, and I vowed I would work for a cure.
My research in molecular biology has been very rewarding.
I expect we'll see gene therapy in our lifetime.
I'm a people person. The bottom line is, I really want to help people.
I volunteered for the pediatrics ward. I'm very empathetic.
When I saw my kitty suffering like that, I knew that I had a calling
to help people in their time of need.
And I think you have to combine humanistic skills
with a passion for making a difference.
And I really just want to help people.
I just want to help people.
I want to help people.
Help people.
Okay, so that is obviously played for comedic effect, but I think the point is really well taken, that there is a lot that they're saying that's right. There's nobility in wanting to help people. Uniting science and medicine is what physicians do every day. But if you're saying the same thing as everybody else, you're not going to come across as someone who makes an impression, and you're not going to be remembered beyond this vague desire to help people. So that's what I want to help you with tonight. We're going to cover the basics of interviewing. Sorry. Oh gosh, I'm sorry about this. Give me one second here.
Kevin.
Stop. Go back there and go to the next slide. Linda, why is it doing this?
There, if you want, I can do my screen.
Kevin.
All right, why don't I do my screen and you turn that?
Okay, that would be fine. Do yours.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Because I can't get past the YouTube video.
All right. There. I'm ready.
Okay, go for it. It's ABC blocks.
Yep, that's what's showing.
Excellent. So we're going to be covering the basics of interviewing tonight, starting with some pre-interview prep that you can do ahead of time and how you'll get everything ready to show you at your best. Then we're going to talk about interview day, what you can expect, and some tactics to help you perform at your best. After that, we'll talk about how to construct your story and tackle a few of the common questions that applicants tend to struggle with. And then lastly, we will talk about practice methods. So this should be a really comprehensive view of interviews for you tonight, people. So the basics, what to wear. I'm often asked what to wear in an interview, and while a perfect outfit won't get you a seat in medical school, a bad one can distract and hurt your chances. So I think this is a worthy topic. In a virtual interview, you should dress just like you would in a face-to-face interview. Pants and shoes will help you feel more professional and engaged. It'll get you in the right mindset, even if they're not seeing it. And if you feel prepared and confident, you're going to come across that way. The reverse is also true. So men should stick with conservative suits. It doesn't have to be black, but darker colors like black or charcoal or navy, and a nice tie and a light contrasting color with a white shirt or maybe a pale blue looks nice, respectable, conservative. I'm going to say conservative a lot because that's kind of the key word for how to dress for medical interviews. Mature and professional are some other keywords you want to look for, even if it is a little boring. For virtual interviews, the color of your belt and shoes isn't that important, but aim for what will make you feel professional. One thing I do want to note is that if it's been a while since you tried on your suit jacket, do that beforehand and make sure that it still fits. Make sure the shoulders are fitting, that it's not too tight, that the sleeves aren't too long or short. You might not be able to afford a custom-made suit, but paying a little bit to a tailor for a few alterations can be a really wise investment, and it'll help you make that best impression that you can. Hair is also a big part of your presentation, so keep it neat and out of your face. If you have a beard that's fully grown in, that's fine. Just make sure it looks neat and tidy. Otherwise, it's best to shave. A 5 o'clock shadow doesn't come across as professional. For women, there's a little more leeway fashion-wise, but you still want to lean toward the conservative. Navy blue and black and gray suits are popular, but you can go for a well-cut suit in another color. Again, make sure they fit well wherever they'll be seen on camera. Solid colored shirts are best, especially at the East Coast schools, which tend to be more traditional. Again, shoes aren't that important for virtual interviews, but wear something that makes you feel professional, confident, and ready to show your best. For your hair, make sure it's neat. If you wear it up, make sure it's secure and not falling out. If it's down or if it's braided, that's fine. Just keep it out of your face and don't touch it during the interview. Makeup, again, is fine, but keep it conservative and professional. There are lots of makeup tutorials for Zoom meetings on YouTube, and these are worth checking out. There's a lot of tips that will help you highlight the right things and how to cover certain blotches that might show up on camera. So those are good to do a little research on. I want you to present the professional you. I know this sounds, on the next slide. I know that this slide sounds like a uniform, and it really is, but if you look the part, you'll be able to make that first impression a good one. A professional look is what you're going for. There's several things you can do in advance to keep calm on interview day. I'm a big advocate of over planning, so your mileage may vary, but my suggestions for making the day go easier start before you ever get to the interview site. Whether you're in person or virtual, get your outfit ready. Make sure it's not wrinkled, that there are no loose threads visible, that there aren't buttons hanging off. Again, make sure that you look professional. Polishing your shoes is less important, obviously, but planning for emergencies is still critical. Do you have an extra shirt in case you spill something on the one you're supposed to wear? Or do you have something to quickly clean it? Do you have everything you need for your face and hair so you won't need to run to the store at the last minute? Do you have a brush sitting beside your computer so you can do one last check before the interview? Try to think about anything that can go wrong and prepare for that, and it will definitely help you out on the interview day. I just want to talk about some video tips quickly. You probably have this down now after a year on Zoom. No, the slides are backwards. Yeah, there we go. After a year on Zoom, you should be pretty savvy with this by now, but hopefully there'll be something you can use here. First, figure out where you want to do the interview. Somewhere with a simple background and that's quiet is best. Having a bed or a lot of clutter in the background gives a poor impression. Whiteboards put behind you, a mesh screen, bookcases, anything like that looks fine as long as it's neat. Just keep the focus on you. Audio is as important as video in choosing your background. So any noises from an open window next to a busy highway, dogs barking outside, anything like that, that can also distract from your polished appearance. Obviously, you can't control all the sounds in your environment, but do what you can. In particular, this means giving everybody in your household a heads up that you've got an interview and ask them to keep quiet while it's going on. Lighting is one more aspect that affects how you present yourself. And you could spend a fortune on lighting equipment, but what you basically need is a task lamp that's placed on the opposite side of your camera, so behind your monitor. The light shouldn't be shining directly on you, but it will brighten your environment. Alternatively, if you have natural lighting, sitting beside a window with indirect light coming at you is a great way to light your face. You just don't want to be backlit because this will wash out your face and the interviewer will just see shadows. Also, before the interview, you want to make sure that your tech works. You don't want to have to be making adjustments during the interview like I was having to do earlier. So sorry about that. You'll start with these basic tech tools, camera, microphone, but make sure you know how to use them effectively and that you like how you look. The webcam or your camera should just be placed right above eye level. If needed, arrange several boxes as a base for the laptop to get it up to the proper height. Also, make sure you have a reliable internet connection. If you can connect via Ethernet, that will help you avoid a lot of problems. If you do have Wi-Fi and you're sharing bandwidth with others, ask them if they can stay offline for your interview or prioritize bandwidth to your device. Just make sure that there aren't jags and problems with it going on. If there are, it's not your fault and that's understood, but at the same time, it doesn't help you make the best impression. Okay, another thing that you should do the night before is to Google recent news on the medical school. Instead of sitting around getting nervous the night before, get on your phone or laptop and do some snooping. Find out what's happening. It might be some new research that interests you or some new wing that they have in the medical school or anything like that. I was just Googling the University of Washington this morning, my alma mater, and discovered that they're looking into ways to use smartphones to detect bacteria that can contribute to acne and slow wound healing. And that's just a really interesting innovation that you might be able to bring up at some point in your interview. So finding out those things that they're proud of, those news items, can be a really good way to find out more about the school. Another thing you want to do is review your stories. Depending on your personal preferences at this point, practicing can be good or bad. You don't want to make yourself more nervous. But if you prepare like I'll suggest below, you'll already know your stories and you'll be able to use them in response to different questions. What might be more constructive at this point is just making sure you know which stories you want to use to answer which questions. And here's where web interviews can have a real advantage. If you have a few key points that you want to remember, write them in sticky notes and place them around your webcam. I'm talking about top line bullet points here, not those fine details, because you do not want to be reading the screen, and don't overclutter your screen with them or place them below eye level. You only want to have like the major ones that you just don't, that you don't want to forget. The key to a really comfortable, stress-free interview is your familiarity with your stories, and you won't get around that with notes. We'll talk more about that in depth in the next section, but just if there's certain things that you want to make sure that you hit, the sticky notes can be a good idea. Finally, you need to take care of yourself. Have a nice healthy meal the night before, take a walk or exercise or do yoga or whatever it takes to help you relax, and go to bed at a reasonable time. Sorry for sounding like a mom here, but this is a really stressful time and you can't perform at your best if you're worn out. So, interview day. To make the best impression, you'll want to give this your full attention. How do you do this? First, you need to minimize your distractions. Remind everyone in your house that you need privacy and quiet. If you have pets, love them, but put them somewhere where they're not going to disturb you. Silence your phone, silence the notifications on your computer, make sure nothing is going to get in your way. Next, check your tech, even if you've done it before. Make sure you're connected to the internet, can sign into the video or phone link that the school's provided, turn on your sound and video, make sure it all works. Third, get anything you might need during the interview. I recommend having a glass of water or apple juice handy. Apple juice is really good if you have a cough or a tickly throat while you're talking, because it will soothe your voice really, or ease your throat and soothe it really well. Hopefully you won't need to drink, but if you do, it's really good to have that handy. Also, it's good to have a notebook and a pen within reach so you can just jot down anything that you might want to ask about later. Finally, in the minutes before the interview, some people do a brief exercise. Others may prefer breathing exercises to calm their thoughts and center themselves. Some people do vocal exercises. We'll talk about more of these later. These are all valid things to do. Just know yourself, know which one is most beneficial for you. No matter how centered you might be, that moment when the interview begins can bring out your anxieties. Being mindful of what you're doing can really help you present at your best. It's important to take a second to compose yourself and make sure your posture is good. Slouching is a nonverbal sign of insecurity and indifference, and it also puts pressure on your lungs and your neck, which can make it hard for you to speak confidently. I want to share a quick posture exercise that we can all do. When you get in front of the camera, we'll practice it right now. But when you get in the front of the camera, it's a really good thing to do right before you turn it on. Sit up straight right now, wherever you are, with your feet planted on the ground. Take a second to roll your shoulders to make sure you're relaxed. Become aware of what your arms are doing. Are they crossed, or are your hands in your pocket? These are nonverbal signs that can show that you're uncomfortable, or nervous. So instead, fold your hands lightly in your lap so you can gesture when you need to. Look directly at the camera, smile, and then you can turn your camera on. With this, you'll start the interview in an engaged and animated tone, which, alongside your appearance, is the key in a virtual interview. Your tone of voice says the most about your interest and enthusiasm, and the best way to deal with any problems is awareness and practice beforehand. Do you sound like this when you're trying to remember what you want to say? Are the words just spilling out without any variation? Many people flatten their voices into a monotone when they get nervous. Your breath and posture affect this, so as you're practicing, Try to be aware of how you're sitting and breathing, and practice using your voice to highlight what you're saying by raising or lowering your voice. If you do this in your practices beforehand, you'll become more aware of your tone and how you might sound more engaged during the actual interview. Other people talk faster. I do this. Their voices will rise and even shake when they get nervous. Women actually tend to do this more, and coincidentally, or not coincidentally rather, it can come across as lacking credibility. The best way, again, to deal with this is with practice. Slow down, get control of your breathing, and use pauses. These can add impact. If you have several people in the interview, try focusing on one of them as you intentionally slow down your speech and inhale. The pitch of your voice should lower as you continue. You also need to be conscious of upspeak, that raising your voice at the end of sentences, and glottal fry. That's that creaky tone that the Kardashians have. I keep harping on breath, but one of the main causes of unintentional glottal fry is that there's simply not enough breath support to carry your words. Again, this speech pattern can undermine your credibility. Reports show that this is especially true when the speaker's female and that they come across as less educated, and this is not the impression you want to convey. In addressing your specific vocal concerns, I urge you again to go to YouTube. There are so many wonderful videos there about different speech issues and how to make adjustments. There's some really good advice there. There's also tons of videos about warm-up exercises. Actors and professional speakers use these all the time to get ready, so you can too. We're about to talk about the content of your interview, but before we do that, I want to fast forward to after the interview, when you'll probably just want to relax. Instead, take a moment, and while the experience is fresh in your mind, record as much as you can remember. Try to scribble down the questions, and if there were any that stumped you, be sure to star those. If you have flubbed an answer, you can even, as one of my clients did, write in her thank you note that she had reflected on the answer later and had come up with a different result, and she wished that she'd said that, and she was subsequently accepted at that school. Even if you don't take such a bold step, knowing which answers to work on will help you prepare for the next interview, and knowing which stories generate interest will help you know what you might want to say again. So it's all really useful to do a good debrief. I mentioned thank you notes earlier, and right after the interview is a great time to take care of these. They don't need to be long, just a few lines referencing something you discussed with the person or the people that you were interviewing with. And if you write them when you're fresh in your mind and upload them to the school's online application portal, you can just check that off your list. Finally, treat yourself. No matter how the interviews went, you survived, and you should reward yourself with some self-care. A nice takeout order, a long bath, whatever will help you feel that you've accomplished this step in the application process. It'll give you a feeling of closure on the interviewers who leave this decision in someone else's hands and let you start with the next one with a fresh head, with a clear head. Okay, so we've covered a lot about the physical things that can help you prepare and perform well on the day. And I know you're probably thinking, how am I supposed to remember all that and what I'm supposed to say at the same time? Like I said before, the key is your familiarity with your stories. If you're already comfortable with what you want to talk about, it'll free up enough real estate in your brain to be conscious of the physical cues. So how do you do that? Well, you could start by writing out perfect answers to every question and reading them over and over and over until you can recite them. This is great if you're a professional actor, but for everybody else, I recommend another approach. What I try to help my clients do, and what I hope I can help you do, is prepare efficiently and get comfortable enough with your stories that you'll be able to share them in a positive and engaging way. Obviously, I can't give you answers to the questions that you'll be asked, but I can give you a method for answering them, which hopefully will help you answer both the question you expect and those that you never saw coming. To do that, I'm going to begin with a few key questions. How do you want the interviewer to think of you? When you finish, what are 3 key impressions that you want to leave with them? What can you tell them about yourself that will reinforce your strengths and address your key weaknesses? How can you show them that you know a great deal about the school, that you're well prepared for the interview? And just as importantly, how can you learn what you need to know to decide if this is a place you want to go to? Preparing the answers to these questions takes place long before the interview. In fact, we'll start tonight. The earlier you start, the better. In answering these questions, you'll set goals for the interview and give yourself a clearer idea of what impression you want to leave with the interviewer beyond that desire to help people. So tonight, I want you to share how you might want an interviewer to think of you. Can you take just a moment and type one quality that you want them to remember? type that in the box, please.
In the chat window, please.
Chat window, yes.
Passionate about medicine,
Yeah.
from Mo. Reliability from Lumi. My empathy towards my community from Sudan. Grit from Alicia. Capable from Adam. There's going to be some more coming. Probably a little latency here. Responsibility from Mike. Committed to inclusivity, Anthony. Kindness, respect, Kaviana. Sruthi says resilience. Tanaka, excitement for research and medical advancement. Swara, strong will, persevering. Sarah, my passion for working with underserved communities. Ali, my adaptability. Julia, excitement and commitment to medicine. Let's see. Anybody else in the chat window, please? Philip adds authenticity, which leads to trust.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Jessica says ability to listen and empathize. Another really good one. David says I have the ability to be a competent physician. It's a great audience, very interactive, very involved.
Okay, there's some really good ideas here.
Yeah, great ones.
What I would like you to think about is try to go behind this beyond this idea of being really committed to medicine, because everybody that's applying is or can claim that they are, and that I've had valuable experiences that made me a good doctor. What we're looking for are these qualities like compassionate, adaptable, adventurous, curious, reliable, authentic. Those are the things that really help you stand out. A lot of people will be smart. A lot of people will be hard workers. These are not things that will make you unique. So try to think of the main qualities that you have that, you know, that kind of make up the core you, the qualities that you depend on no matter what situation you're in, whether it's medicine or anything else. So these qualities are going to help you answer the question, what makes you special? How do you answer that old gem? If there's 50 other applicants in the room, why should we pick you? This is what your personal statement and your secondary essays have already started to answer. And if you've done a good job on those, and you did if you've been invited to interview, then you'll be able to pull out these elements to expand on. Go through these carefully and pull out those main qualities that you want to present to the admissions committee. In your answers, you'll keep coming back to these main ideas, reiterating them, reaffirming them, instilling them in the minds of the interviewer. Once you know what you want to emphasize, how can you make sure these ideas come through? What I want you to do is take these qualities, your adaptability, your resilience, your integrity, your authenticity, and yes, even your work ethic, and think of a couple of personal stories that evidence each quality you've listed. If these really are your core qualities, this exercise shouldn't be too difficult. You should be able to come up with several instances where you've demonstrated each characteristic. Some of your stories are going to illustrate multiple qualities, which is even better. To put it another way, I'm asking you to think about your qualities and characteristics rather than answers to specific questions. It's a shift in thinking that's going to give you a lot more flexibility during the interview. So let's see how this is done with someone I was working with a few years ago. Next slide, Linda. This is a way that a client initially explained her research. It's a pretty basic description of every research project. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. My main role is inputting and interpreting data. I'm involved in weekly group discussions. I'm an author review to determine efficacy. I'm also working on another review now. I'm interested in collecting data from various articles. It's not inaccurate, but it's not thrilling. However, from these few lines, the applicant can pull out several elements. There's maturity there. There's critical thinking. There's collaboration there. These are just some of the strengths that she can convey. But don't make the interviewer do the work for you. Bring these into focus. The next slide shows how the description can be made. No, go back one, Linda.
Sorry.
Yeah. This one shows how this description will sound more engaging. The applicant tells the same story, but this time she's pulling out the elements she enjoys and that she's good at. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. What's interesting is that while inputting and interpreting data, my critical thinking skills have gotten stronger. Now I'm understanding subtleties in data and detecting patterns that I want to explain. Our lab's very collaborative, and I always look forward to contributing at weekly group discussions and hearing about our projects. So this is a good answer, but how is she going to remember this perfectly phrased, complete answer? If she can remember just a few key points she wants to make, she can easily revise them on the fly. That's the next slide. Nope, that's backwards.
Going backwards, all right.
Other way. There we go. So this would be, for instance, what you might want to put on your sticky note. In Johnson's lab for 3 years, demonstrates continuity, independent interpreting data, demonstrates critical thinking, contributions and hearing others, highlights teamwork. So this is, she knows that she's going to be asked about research. She can emphasize these points. But what if she doesn't get asked about research? What if instead she's asked about an example of how she works with others? In that case, she can just modify this example, this story on the fly, taught using the same elements. I've been involved in the Johnson lab for 3 years. Our lab is very collaborative. At our weekly group discussions, everybody has a chance to share our projects and we help each other. Independent interpreting data can be solitary work, but input from other lab members has really sharpened my critical thinking skills and helped me to work well in a group setting. See the difference here? She switched from using that research experience as a focus to using it as evidence to support her unique qualities, her critical thinking, her collaborative abilities, her resilience and continuity in the lab. You want your stories to multitask for you. If you can get very comfortable telling your stories and know which qualities or traits they illustrate, you'll be able to address unexpected answers with no problem. So let's talk now about some strengths and weaknesses. Med schools love asking applicants to identify these. If you've already figured out what qualities are present in your stories, then you're halfway there. Let's take for strengths, let's take our applicant above. She's prepared stories about her research, her community service, and her work on a medical mission. In her hypothetical interview here, she's already been asked about her mission and community service. So this is a great opportunity to bring up her research, which, as she's already decided, illustrates her critical thinking and teamwork, and even her persistence. So she chooses one of these as her strength, pops in her example from the lab, and away she goes. Greatest weaknesses, they're trickier. But again, it's about framing your answer. Nobody is perfect, and med schools want students who are self-aware enough to know what needs work. They also want to know that 1, your weakness isn't debilitating, and 2, that you're working on it. There's no point in saying you're a perfectionist, but you might be overly detail-oriented, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in medical fields. Or you might have a tendency to bite off more than you can chew and overcommit yourself. That's a common problem for med school applicants. On the other extreme, you might be shy or you might have trouble taking risks. Any of these weaknesses could be severely debilitating, or they might be no big deal. But I think it's human nature to imagine the worst. So rein in their imaginations, or as I like to say, put it in a box. Explain how in the past, your shyness kept you from joining clubs back in high school. Or share a time in your freshman year when you had trouble balancing all your responsibilities. This will set boundaries for your weakness, hopefully ones that aren't surmountable. Sharing what you've done to overcome your weakness is important too. Whether you've learned better time management or joined a local Toastmasters club, show the interviewer that you don't just know that you have these weaknesses, but that you're taking steps to conquer them. This doesn't necessarily apply to those weak spots on your application. But remember that you do not need to bring them up unless you're asked. You've been invited to interview. So any deficiencies that are already there are likely not a deal breaker for them. However, they may ask you to explain something like a bad semester or a big gap in your timeline. It might sound cliched, but honesty is really your best policy here. Frame your answers in a way that shows that you accept responsibility for whatever happened and that you have learned from the experience. So let's say you get it over your head one semester and your GPA suffers, or there were family issues and you had to withdraw. That happens. Be upfront and explain it. But just like with the research example above, you want to show what positive qualities you took from the experience. How did you get back on track? Did you develop new study techniques or make use of the professor's office hours? Did you develop new coping mechanisms, taking counseling or exercise? Don't oversell the positive side of the experience, but show them that if this happens again, you've got the tools to deal. Again, preparing these answers ahead of time is going to go a long way to addressing them in an interview. As well as knowing your stories, you need to show that you know a great deal about the program and that you'll be a valuable addition to their class. You probably answered a question like, why do you want to go here on your secondary? Be sure to review these carefully so you can expand and not contradict them. You also want to emphasize your fit in all your answers. Don't wait until you're asked why you want to go here. If you're clear about their mission, you can weave that into your answers. You can do this, for instance, by linking the research interest into the program. So Mount Sinai School of Medicine mission says, Mount Sinai will be a participant in efforts to define and solve health problems in population groups and communities through its capability in developing scientific knowledge, education, and service. So when our model applicant is asked about her research in the Johnson Lab, she links it to this idea. And she says, I'm glad you asked me about that because the East Harlem Health Outreach Partnership on Diabetes is one of the main reasons I'm drawn to this program. And after she explains what the Johnson Lab is doing with targeted insulin receptors, she closes it with something like, I've learned a lot from my research, and now I want to see how diabetes is treated in this community. So if you do this research, you can really make that closer connection with your own experiences and what they're offering. So where do you get these details? Your first stop should be the School of Medicine website. You've probably already visited it for the secondary essays. It's a great place to get details about the curriculum and student activities, which are great aspects to highlight in your answers. Another useful place for that kind of information is, like I said before, that news section on their website. This is where you'll find what they're excited about. These are the kind of things, the new scholarships, the new wings, the simulation labs, whatever they're especially proud of. These are the things that admissions people like to talk about and the kinds of things that you can know before the interview. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Googling news from outside sources can give you information that might not be readily available on their websites. You might come across an article, for instance, about how med students at Mercer are cultivating a garden because Macon, Georgia is a food desert. And if you're interviewing at Mercer and you have an interest in food insecurity, this is a great connection to make. Finally, network. By now, you should know where every one of your personal physicians, research associates, and professors went to school. If one went to the school where you're interviewing, ask them about it. Find out what you can about the facilities, the culture, popular lunch spots, everything. Use every resource that you can to show you know about the program and you know why you want to go there. Finally, I want to talk about that most dreaded question of all. Tell us about yourself. It's often one of those first questions that you get at an interview, and it's where you'll embellish these ideas that you want to present. Your first line does not need to be, my name is. They already know this. And you don't have to follow that with, I was born in. Although that can work well, and you can tackle the whole question in chronological order, finding a common theme that pulls together elements of your experiences can be much more engaging. What I like to do with clients is to have them tackle this question by introducing any ideas you might want to include. Your family background, cultural upbringing, interests, hobbies, anything like that. Community service, clinical activities, anything that could potentially be used as part of the tell me about yourself question. After this, for lack of a better word, brain dump, we'll repackage it. We'll tease through the different threads and find out what they have in common. For instance, you might want to set up your answer around a person or an idea that inspires you, like this research-oriented applicant did. She starts talking about her mother's immigration from China, framing her life dedicated to teaching and learning in light of her mom's determination to be educated. This gives her a chance to talk briefly about her research, about discovery through her hobbies, and her community service dedicated to teaching. Then she has a killer ending line. Now, I said earlier not to memorize your answers, and the only exception to this is, I think, the first and the last line of your tell me about yourself question. If you can give your story a great set of bookends, it can definitely help you stand out. Another client of mine, an older non-traditional student, started by rambling through the twists and turns of his career, and it ran the risk of boring listeners. I got him to start with a startling statement like, my high school biology teacher said I'd never amount to anything. As I was painting houses in the hot Florida sun, I thought he was right, but today I work for a medical device company. This is an interesting story. Those details that are his alone that make the difference and that make the admissions committee remember him. It's always good to embed your qualities in these interesting details of your life. A few years ago, I had a client who his intro was that he always thought he'd be a pro baseball player until he started volunteering at a nursing home, discovered he liked that better. These atypical background details catch the interviewer's attention. In this case, it prompted a conversation about baseball that helped them connect. And that's the key that you want to have. That will make your interview more conversational. It'll make the people remember you. It's that connection and those details. So don't shy away from that. The key is to get the ideas out before you try to make sense of them. Writing them, recording them, anything that you do like that, it can be the brain dump that you need to figure out what are the main and most interesting things that you want to present. If a friend or an admissions consultant can help you sort through them, so much the better. It's often hard to be objective about our own experiences. So get some help on this. I'm often asked if this answer needs to explain an applicant's motivation for medicine. Well, I think the stories you share should naturally lead to that. This is really a different question. While you will probably have some aspects pointing to your interest in medicine there, whether it's your experiences or your interest in sciences, you'll need more if you truly want to tell them about you. But you address the why I want to be a doctor question in the same way. Identify the string of events that led to your decision. Not every twist and turn. They'll have your primary and secondary essays for that. But knowing where your motivation comes from and how it shaped your future, those things need to come across in this answer. So how long should these answers be? Tell me about yourself is going to be your longest one. Usually clocks in around 3, possibly 4 minutes. Longer than that, and you run the risk of losing the listener's attention. Well, what if I have more to say? What if I want to tell them about something in detail? Well, a simple way to save yourself is just to say, you know, I could talk about this all day, but I know you've got other questions, so just let me know if I can answer anything else about this. If they're interested, they'll ask follow-up questions. And if not, you've opened the door for a subject that interests them more. So, in short, the idea behind all this is to make sure that you know your answers, you haven't memorized them, that you focus on learning the stories that you can adapt for different purposes, that you're comfortable telling them in different ways. How do you do that? Practice. So remember that you want your interview to feel conversational, engaging. Linda, next slide.
Sure.
Conversational, engaging, and unrehearsed. That's a tall order when you're feeling nervous and maybe even a little desperate. So practice is the best thing that you can do to help you feel comfortable and even natural telling these stories. There are many ways to practice, both by yourself and with others. The number one way is to practice your stories by talking to yourself. Talk to yourself when you're driving in a car, when you're in the shower, when you're washing dishes, anytime that you're alone. I really like this method because it helps you get comfortable without setting aside a designated practice time. You don't even answer a specific question. Just talk about a clinical activity that you had, or a community service activity that you had, or pretend that you're telling your friend about your research. These are the kind of things that later you'll be able to slot into places for various questions when you need them. You can also record or film yourself. I don't recommend that you do this every time you need practice. It gets you away from that informal storytelling that I think is so important. But do it at least once at the start of your practice so you can see how you sound to others. Linda, if we need more slides. If you'll record yourself, you'll see how you sound to others. If you speak in a monotone, for instance, or if you overuse filters like or actually, or if you do anything annoying with your hands. You can also, pay attention to these in the beginning. And if you're recording yourself at those early stages of practice, I guarantee it'll help you find problem areas where you still have time to improve. As I mentioned earlier, YouTube is chock full of videos from speech coaches addressing every issue imaginable so you can sound clear and confident. Another thing you can do is debate yourself. I like to do this with ethical and philosophical questions. With most of these, there's no right or wrong answer. The interviewers just want to see that you're informed and able to think about challenging topics. Reading current issues of JAMA helps. I also want to refer you to the University of Washington's great bioethics discussion page. The link is there on the slide. This has a ton of articles. I don't want you to have to read all of them, but there's some really interesting discussions on what to do if for patients that don't consent to procedures, or different ethical issues that you might have with attendings who might be making mistakes, or things like that. There's just a wealth of information that really goes into the meat of some of these arguments. If you're debating yourself, you're arguing both sides of a popular issue. So for instance, cannabis legalization or abortion. Presenting these different viewpoints can ensure that you really understand what you're talking about and that you can make a coherent argument for or against an issue. And this can really be important, especially if you're doing a group exercise or a group discussion with other people in the interview. Another way you can practice is with other people. Give your friends or roommates or parents even a list of questions and have them fire them at you. Be sure to ask them for honest feedback or they'll just tell you that you're doing great. You can also schedule a mock interview with a consultant. We're paid to give you honest feedback, and this can be a useful tool to help you identify and address some difficult problem areas for you. I go over the specific questions for the schools that my clients are interviewing at, and we also tackle some ethical questions, some behavioral questions. So that can be another good way to get some good practice in. You can start practicing at any time. In fact, the earlier, the better. The more aware you are of your personal quirks, the more likely you'll have time to address them. And the more accustomed you are to sharing your stories, the more comfortable you will be in the interview. That's it. I know there's a lot riding on your next interview, and I hope what we've talked about tonight will help you. And if you have questions, please stick around, and good luck to you all.
Thank you, Sid, for the wonderful presentations. It's certainly very informative, and I think it's given all attendees food for thought and practice. Now, applicants, attendees, I want to just have a little, short conversation with you. This is Linda Abraham again. And first of all, I'd like to know, what did you find most valuable in Sid's presentation to this point? If you could respond in the chat window, I would really appreciate that. What did you find most valuable in terms of an inside piece of information, technique that she suggested? You're going to say, wow, that was a great idea. In the chat window, please. Start with qualities and then tell your story. Great, thank you, Sonia. Talking to yourself and recording. Thank you, Kaviana. Intertwining the school's mission into your conversation, Googling current news about X school. Yeah, those are really good ideas. Answer, tell us about yourself. Practicing the tone of voice, practicing stories by talking to yourself and ensuring the key qualities are highlighted. Taking an activity and turning it into strengths and qualities. Boxing your weakness. Sid, you've done great. Integrate their mission into your answers. Yeah, another really good point. All right. Thank you very much for your responses. We're going to get to the Q&A in just a few minutes. Now it's my turn to share a few thoughts about the medical school interview. If you're lucky enough to get called for interviews, and I think a third of you had been called already or have received invitations, which is fantastic. First of all, celebrate. You've made enough of a positive impression with your primary and secondary applications for the admissions committee members to want to invest more time in getting to know you and seeing if you are a fit for their community. That invitation represents opportunity. But it also presents risks. Are you going to present yourself in your interview as a future professional? Remember what Sid was saying at the beginning about coming across as a professional in terms of your attire, your tone of voice, your responses? Are you going to come across as someone who would be a thoughtful member of their community and later a compassionate physician whom the interviewer could see treating his or her loved one? Are you going to successfully implement all the excellent advice that Cydney has provided today? That's your challenge. It's a challenge that Sid and her colleagues here at Accepted would like to help you meet with flying colors. I'd like to tell you a story about a call I had not too long ago. An applicant inquired about our med school mock interview package. I gave her the details, and at the end she said, I have one more question. Why do I need this service? Can't I just interview on my own? Can't I just research the schools, think about likely questions and my best answers? Well, first of all, Sid was strongly recommending that you practice. But I asked the caller, have you ever performed either in music, theater, or the arts, or perhaps in sports? But she replied, yes, I play piano. Would you consider performing without rehearsing? Would you want to go on stage after just thoroughly reviewing the musical score and thinking about it? Or a script from a play? Or perhaps just watching videos of your favorite sport? Our mock interview is like a rehearsal. And like all rehearsals, it allows you to improve and polish your performance before the big day, before the real thing, before you're really on stage. Now, let's look at some sample feedback from people who've had their dress rehearsal accepted. I don't think, Sid, thank you so much for your help so far. I have been invited to 17 interviews, accepted at 4 schools, and awarded a full scholarship at one of them. Or, thank you so much. I don't think I would be at the same place today without your and Cydney's help. So out of 20 secondaries, I received 18 interviews. I went to 11, accepted to 5, and waitlisted to 4. Now, Cyd is absolutely fantastic, but she does sometimes book up. So there are other excellent consultants here. And this one is for Alicia. I had the pleasure of working with Alicia to prepare my medical school interview. Through our many practice sessions, I felt confident, prepared the day of the interview, and was fortunate to receive an acceptance to the medical school of my dreams. These applicants are pursuing their medical school dreams. I'd like to urge you to follow the path they took so that you too can pursue your medical school dreams. And that path is outlined on your screen. At this point, let's start the Q&A. Some of these questions I can answer. Emily, answer. Emily, the recording should be sent out either tomorrow or the day after. Okay. Bo asked, what if she, and that was Cydney, this reflects, let me also turn my video on so you can see my smiling face as well. Cyd, I think the question is referring to the research example a little bit ago. And the question is, what if she's asked about teamwork and research separately? Will she have to repeat, or is she better off coming up with a different example?
So one of the things that I think is really valuable is to have your qualities and then have several examples for each one. So if you're asked to talk about teamwork, you could talk about your research. You could also probably talk about a community service activity or a group work in school. If these are your core qualities, what I was saying is that you can, you're not just going to have one example to prove it. If these are truly your main qualities, you're going to see them over and over again in your history. So preparing different stories is recommended for that.
Yeah. All right, see what else we have here. Anonymous attendee asks, how long is a typical interview?
It varies. And with the virtual interviews, it's gone out the window. In-person interviews used to range from like 30 minutes to an hour. There would be several of them, and you would go to campus and do tours and orientations and all these kind of things. Now every school is doing them differently. Some of them are like 15 minutes recorded in advance. Some others are where you'll actually have a live interview talking to a person. And I would, plan on 30 minutes, but this is something the school will tell you. This is part of when they invite you, they'll let you know.
Okay, great, thanks. And then this question, it seems the interview repeats information in the personal statement for secondaries. How do you avoid repeating information from the application?
So a lot of times the interviewer will not have read your personal statement in secondaries. In closed file interviews, you'll be presenting yourself new to them. If they have read it, they probably have not digested it completely. So you don't want to repeat everything that you said before, but these are your experiences. What you wrote in your 15 experiences, or however many if you did DO schools, that's what you have to work with. So you want to use those and pull out different things about them. Probably in 5,300 characters, you didn't say everything you wanted to say about your life. So, try to think of some other things, but you are working with that material.
All right. I think it's also, as you said, so I think it's important to know if the interviewer has seen your primary or secondaries or has not seen the primary or secondaries. If they haven't, then that material is prime. That's your best material. Reuse it. If they have seen the primary and secondaries, then you might have to dig a little harder or perhaps approach it from a different angle, much like Cyd suggested with the research example. Are you going to talk about critical thinking or teamwork?
And that is a question you could ask the admissions committee when you're invited for the interview. You could ask them about that.
Okay, great. So Sarah says, and there's a couple of questions along this line. I have my first interview next week and it's a virtual MMI. Do you have any specific tips for MMI type interviews? And indeed, there's another question. It's basically the same, but are they mostly ethical questions or do they ask personal traditional questions as well?
So many tips. Linda, that's our separate interview. Are we doing
We're not doing
a
it this year.
session?
We're not doing it this year because there are many fewer MMIs, but there are more this year than last year because schools are adjusting to this
Okay.
virtual world.
Wow. Okay. So that's a big question. There are MMIs are designed to see how well you react in situations. They're not tests of knowledge. So the best ways to work well in an MMI interview is to show that you think well, that you can analyze things on the fly, that you're objective, that you don't make snap decisions. There are ethical questions. There's a lot of personal behavioral questions as well, like how you will react in an emergency situation, how your empathy comes across, how well you, how will you think on the fly, basically. There's so many tips for this. I can't do this right now, unfortunately. I wonder.
We do have the webinar on the multiple mini interview on our YouTube channel, and just go to accepted.com. I'm sorry, it's youtube.com/accepted video and do a search there, and you'll see what we came. What we
have a look at that. That will help you a lot because this is an hour-long session. They're very different than traditional interviews.
Right. Yeah. Go for that. Now, anonymous attendee asks, what's a multiple mini interview? What is an MMI? It's a multiple mini interview where you will have very short interviews, frequently with actors, who will be essentially seeing how you respond to their behavior, or you might be different ethical situations, as some have said. It's a whole different menu of interview options, but very short. What do you say? Is that a pretty good explanation?
Yeah, they are basically their behavioral situations. If you've done Casper, you'll have seen a lot of similar questions like
that. All right, a few more questions. Answer that one. Okay, here's a good one, Sid. How to stay confident throughout the process. So far, I've noticed myself very stressed out, worrying about not having enough experiences to talk about.
Okay. I don't know if you've been invited to interview yet. If you have, then they like the experiences they've seen. So that in itself should give you confidence. But I also think that surrounding yourself with people who will support you is really important. Having people in your life who will boost your confidence, who'll give you that pep talk that you need. It may be something that you need to deal with your stress and get it out of your system in some way, exercise or yoga or anything like that. So you're going to have a lot of stress, especially if you go into medical school. And this is kind of like a mini test to see how you handle it. So I think, making sure you have good support system is really important, but also figure out how you can give yourself confidence. With your experiences, don't worry about the number, but really try to pull out the qualities and the good things about your experiences and make the most of them.
I would add that mock interview, or especially the gold mock interview package, does wonders for one's confidence. You've practiced, you've gotten feedback, you've improved. So, I mean, I'm obviously biased on the value of it, but that's one way. And the feedback that we frequently get from our mock interviews, especially the mock interview package, is that it does boost people's confidence. Okay, so next question. Do you need to prepare for ethical questions for a traditional interview?
It's good to know. I mean, there are, that's the link that I included with the bioethics page. You want to prepare everything. And the ethics questions are very similar. So you just really need to know how you should react if a physician is doing something that isn't ethical, or what you should do if you see someone cheating on an exam. Think about these things in advance. Think about how you're going to answer them. A lot of these, there aren't necessarily wrong answers. especially if it's about a more amorphous topic. Trying to think of one right now. Like they could ask you how you'll treat a patient who has cancer for the first time. What do you need to tell them? And there's some answers that are great for that, and then there's some that aren't as good. So yes, preparing them is really important.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Now, Mike asked, would I explain a low Casper score?
Ooh, oh, I see you wrote too that to follow up your low score was due to your slow typing skills. Again, honesty is the best policy with these. If you explain that you're not a fast typer, that can help. So Casper scores, schools say that they don't necessarily have a pass or fail with Casper. I mean, I know you're ranked in the quartiles, but they are looking at that more to see just your ideas. And if you didn't have time to present everything and they ask you about it, then explain, yes, my typing skills could be better and I wasn't able to say everything that I wanted to say.
The other thing is, if you're invited to interview, they apparently are okay with it.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true as well. Schools, though, a lot of the schools say they don't weed you out for poor Casper scores. So it's not that they're less important. They are important to help you see how you react to situational and behavioral questions, but they are a little less, I think you need to worry about those a little bit less than you do about a low MCAT score, for instance.
And then if you get the opportunity to attend an interview in person versus online, is it better to attend in person?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right. And I think right now, by the way, I think it's a very hypothetical question.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any because the medical schools really seem to want to keep everybody on a consistent level so that it's fair to everyone. But I know in the past they have done, if you were able to, before COVID, they did offer some like remote interview opportunities, or you could travel to the school. In those cases, definitely going to the school is better. You get to see what things are like. You get to have those personal interactions with people who are actually at the school and on the admissions committee, as opposed to like an alumni in the city where you live. So in those cases, yeah, in person is better.
Okay. I've interviewed several med school admissions directors for our podcast, which is Admission Straight Talk. And I think every single one has said that this year, interviews are entirely virtual, whether MMI or traditional. And when I sometimes follow that up with, do you see a return to in-person interviews? The jury's still out. Or will they allow some to interview in person and some virtually? Again, the jury is still very much out there. They're uncertain. Many of them really want it to go back to in-person, but they also understand that in-person can be quite a financial burden for applicants, time burden, financial burden for applicants. And they like the fact that they're not causing that. So they're still weighing that up. So I'm not sure that you're gonna have that option. Obviously, I know that many people here are not applying right now, but for this year, I think almost all interviews are going to be virtual. Okay, so again, I want to thank you for your time, attention, questions, and answers. You've been a fantastic audience. I want to thank you, Sid, for your very informative and practical presentation. Thanks. And last thought before we leave, remember the applicants who had their dress rehearsals with accepted med school admissions expert? It's far better to go into the interview knowing you're prepared and ready. This goes back to the question of nerves, than to be in the interview wishing you'd had that dress rehearsal beforehand. So do as these applicants did, as the ones that we've told you about did. They're now pursuing their dream profession. They got accepted and they were accepted. You can do exactly as they did. I also have a question for you, if you'd be kind enough to take a minute and answer it. You've listened to Sid's excellent presentation. You've listened to my pitch. You've attempted the Q&A. And I'm wondering if you could share with me, given that you are interested in what we have to say, if you are not a client or aren't planning to be a client, can you please share with me why you're hesitating to engage with somebody like Sid or one of our other outstanding consultants. Price. Okay, Mike, that's a good answer. Anybody else want to share? I'm doing this for my son who's 4 years away. That's a good reason. Okay, not to engage with us right now, though there could be some advantages even engaging early. In terms of the price, Mike, if you're invited to interview, you are so close to medical school acceptance. And getting accepted a year earlier can save you or basically earn you an additional, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars additionally. The cost of a mock interview is, I think, one mock interview is $500, and the gold package, which is 3 mock interviews, is a little bit more than $1,000 with the discount. Again, you can look it up online. And obviously, you have to have the money. I understand that, but to put that much money at risk, considering the benefits, could be the best investment you're ever going to make in your life. So obviously, we do also have a firm on the site, which allows you to stretch out your payments over 36 months, but it does charge interest. We don't earn that interest. We actually pay extra to allow a firm to be on the site. There's also PayPal, which gives you 6 months at no interest to pay. So there are options that can make this much more feasible. In terms of the father who's doing this for his son, who's 4 years away from applying, you certainly don't need a mock interview package right now for your son, but you may benefit, or he may benefit, from being able to talk to an advisor who can advise him on what classes to take, what major might be a good major, what activities to get involved with, how to time his MCAT exam, whether to take a gap year or not, all those kinds of things. Sid, do you have anything to add to that one, or any of these actually?
No.
No?
Not really.
No?
I think I'm talked out.
Okay, great. Well, the presentation was outstanding, so that's good.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share? I hope I'm really interested, and I want to thank Mike and Jim for sharing their thoughts. Okay, fine, Jim, that's great. We'll be happy to work with him whenever he's ready. In that case, once again, thank you all for coming, for attending, for sharing your thoughts, your answers, your questions, your time. Sid, thank you again for an outstanding presentation.
Thank you.
Good luck to everybody with their medical school applications and, of course, the interview. Take care.
Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.